Well, hello everyone. Disclaimer, so I did go back onto my computer for these two sessions. The reason is I'm going to be showing some YouTube videos, and I wanted to make sure that everything went pretty well, like based on those. So I hope that everyone is good. These are the last two sessions, and I don't know how much Bible stuff we're going to be doing, but I think it is pertinent when you're talking about seeing the Bible through the eyes of the scribes. And so basically what we've done since the very beginning is take a look at how the scribes had a lot of fun, like twisting our preconceived notions on their head. And I think from the knowledge and the wisdom and the knowledge, understanding, and wisdom that we have gained from looking at the threads that go through Scripture, from everything that we've covered in the past year, it has been a year now. Like we are, if you're looking at the Gregorian calendar, we are at the year mark. If you're talking about so this is like the year plus 1 week, right? But based on the Hebrew calendar, this is a leap year. So we have 2 extra sessions. So for the exact year that we've been looking at the threads and stuff, I think it'll be a good exercise to look at the history of the Christian church, looking at it through the same eyes that the scribes did of the Old Testament, looking at it through the same eyes that that the early Christians had, like how they were able to use the same themes from the Old Testament and cause them to intertwine even more in the New Testament, and then see what witness has been provided for the past 2,000 years. I think it'll be a good exercise to just sit back and take a look at things from the macro perspective. And that's why I like to do I'm personally, like even when I pray on the macro level. And everyone is different. Some people go into like the individual level, or like, but for me, just the way I just approach prayer is, to begin with, is looking at things as a whole. And I think this would be a good experience to look at things as a whole. Just like we did this with Revelation, and now we're getting into it with how Revelation has played out in the past 2,000 years, as well as before, because remember, things that were, are, and are to come. So let's just see like how the things that we've studied really come into light. So here we go. I'm going to share the screen. I do hope that the computer actually behaves today, but did you have that? Oh, they were going to say something. But worst case scenario, I will switch platforms, but hopefully I don't need to. Here we go. Course. All right, we're good. Hold on. All right, I got captions there just in case it's harder to hear. And let's go. 3, 2, 1.
We're going to start this off in a way that we've never started off in Extra History before, with a disclaimer. These next few episodes are designed to help modern students get a handle on one of the most confusing and yet most important parts of Roman history. The topics discussed in these episodes are vital to understanding the Roman mind, to understanding why Rome fell, and how the Western world made the transition from the classical era to the medieval one. We're going to try to make this as engaging as we can, but it is going to involve a lot of nitty-gritty detail about doctrinal disputes. To a modern mind, these disputes may seem inconsequential, but they tore empires apart and turned father against son back in the waning days of Rome. Even in our episodes about Justinian, we found that the lack of ability to easily reference things like the Monophysite schism or the difference between Arian Christianity and Orthodox Christianity impacted how thoroughly we could tell the story. So hopefully we can rectify that today. So let's dive into the Docetic Schism, Judaizing Christianity and Gnosticism. Before we can discuss the struggles that changed empires, we have to discuss the struggles that determined what form of Christianity the Empire of Rome would come to accept. And for that, our story begins on the baked plains of Asia Minor. It's difficult sometimes for us in the present day to think of Christianity as something not yet solidified. It's hard to imagine it without the New Testament. It's harder still to think of it not as a religion of its own, but rather an offshoot of Judaism. And yet out here on the plains of Asia Minor in the 1st and 2nd century CE, that's the issue that many early Christians wrestled with. I mean, were they still Jewish? Could only Jews be Christians? Did Christ overthrow the Mosaic law, or was he simply a continuation of it? And on the answer to this question hangs everything. Why? Circumcision. I know, it's funny, but the fate of Western society really did hang on circumcision. Because, you see, the Judaizing Christians, the Christians who wanted to follow the Mosaic laws strictly, wanted everybody to be circumcised. And in an age before anesthetic, when you're asking grown men to have their foreskin cut off as the entry fee for joining your religion, you're just not going to get as many takers. And this is why Paul rails against circumcision in the book of Galatians. He, like many of those we now consider church fathers, knew that for the religion to really grow, for it to really be a force, they would have to convert the Gentiles, the people of the Roman Empire. And the only way to do that was to abandon some of the Jewish practices those people would find the hardest to accept. And as this viewpoint won over more practitioners, the Judaizing forces began to be squeezed out of what we consider mainstream Christianity, eventually leading to further attempts to distance the two religions, like declaring Sunday as a holy day instead of Saturday. But for us, the important part is that without the fateful decision to break from Jewish tradition, a decision which split the church and whose consequences in terms of fracturing the early Christian community are written into the Bible itself, without that decision, Rome probably would never have become a Christian state, changing history forever. But even as the Judaizing forces were waning, there was another question that tore early Christian society in two. This question was on the nature of Christ. Was he a man? Was he a spirit? What was his relationship to God? And this would turn into one of those knock-down, drag-out questions, with bishops calling other Christians antichrists and worse than pagans because of their views on it. In fact, this question is going to come up over and over and over again in this series, because this question, which eventually morphs into questions about the Trinity, sits at the root of so many conflicts in the church. But let's start here, in the early 2nd century, still in the plains of Asia Minor. A bishop called Ignatius is arrested. He's going to be taken to Rome, sentenced to die in the Colosseum for his faith. But along the road to Rome, he writes to his followers time and again with a warning. Not a warning against the Romans. He seems almost eager to meet his fate. No, a warning against other Christians. Christians who do not see Christ the way he does. Christians that inhabit his very city, Antioch. Docetists. Docetists believed that Christ was a being of pure spirit, that he didn't actually exist in human form, that he only seemed to us to exist. For, after all, didn't it denigrate the Christ to claim that he'd ever been part of our sinful race? But that sat very, very poorly with some other Christians. If you've ever wondered why John in the epistles continuously talks about the importance of believing in Christ, quote, in the flesh, if you've wondered why that phrase comes up over and over again, it's actually a dig at these guys. When he says, every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is not of God, and this is that spirit of Antichrist. Reading that today, it might seem like he's aiming that condemnation at pagans or non-Christians, but he's actually taking a shot at the Docetists. Why? Because what happens when you make Christ a being of pure spirit? What becomes of his sacrifice? A spirit can't suffer. Without that, where's the pathos? Where's the actual sacrifice of his death? And what becomes of the resurrection? A spirit can't die, so what does it mean for it to be resurrected? Can our sins even be forgiven without sacrifice? Can we be reborn if the Christ was not? And these were all important questions in a time of persecution and death. When simply being known as a Christian might mean execution, you needed something to hold on to. Which brings us back to Ignatius and what's going on in Rome. As Ignatius was off to do his last dance with the lions, he was thinking a lot about martyrdom, and he wrote to his followers about how glad he was to truly follow Christ, even in this. And martyrdom was a powerful symbol. It gave strength to the community to endure persecution, and it impressed those not yet of the faith. It helped to win over Romans, and became an ingrained part of the understanding of Christianity. But to have the symbolic power of martyrdom, and the very relatable, very sympathetic, very human sacrifice of Christ, the Christian church had to purge itself of yet another group of people who called themselves Christians, the Docetists, and eventually reinforce these ideas with things like transubstantiation, the consumption of the body and the blood of Christ in communion. But with this culling of the church, the stage is now set. With the inclusion of the Gentiles and the rejection of a doctrine which sees Jesus as pure spirit, Christianity is set to grow. As imperial order falls apart during the 3rd century crisis, and the state can no longer provide food for the poor or care for the sick, the church steps in. Converts from all walks of life, but especially the impoverished, begin to join the faith. These do seem like the end times of which the Christians preach. To many in the empire, it seemed like a time of divine reckoning for humanity's sins. But then, as the 3rd century begins to close, order is restored to the world. Aurelian puts the pieces of the empire back together, and Diocletian and Maximian solidified those gains. And with this restabilizing of the empire come some of the harshest crackdowns on the Christian faith. But then the miraculous, or highly calculated, happened. In 312 CE, a civil war rocked the empire. At the deciding battle, the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, one of the leaders, Constantine, had a vision. It told him to have his men paint the letters Chi Rho, the first two letters in Greek of the word Christ, on their shields, and if this was done, he would conquer. It was done, and he won the day and became master of the Roman Empire. Now, whether you buy the vision story whole hog or accept some of it as a later bit of revisionism that's come down to us is up to you. But what we do know for certain is that after this battle, Constantine began to repeal the laws banning Christians and even began to support them. This was a sea change. Even with its rapid growth during the turbulent years of the 3rd century, Christians only comprised 10% of the Roman Empire. Within 40 years, they would make up over half of it. But before that, there's a rocky road ahead. Join us next time as we finally get to the heresies that shook the empire. Oh, and for those of you who know the history here and are wondering about some of the things I've not mentioned, expect James to talk more about Constantine's faith in the Lies episode after we're done. See you next time.
All right, we're not going to watch the Lies one because that one takes forever. That one's like 25 minutes, and we're already doing like 25 minutes of videos today. So if you want to watch the Lies thing, there it is. I have not watched it, so I don't know what they're talking about, but it's interesting to see that. Anyway, I think right now, I did, let's take a look at something real quick. I did want to cause us to take a look at a couple of things.
It's actually a dig at these guys. When he says, "Every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is not of God, and this is that spirit of Antichrist." Reading that today, it might seem like he's aiming that condemnation at pagans or non-Christians, but he's actually taking a shot at the Docetists. Why? Because what happens when you make Christ a being of pure spirit? What becomes of his...
I forget exactly where it was, but they were basically saying, oh yes, right? For after all, didn't it denigrate the Christ to claim that he'd never been part of our sinful race? That it's the whole concept is I thought that was interesting because like how often do we today talk about Christ as being so beyond attainable that like he goes, yeah, but he was God, he was Christ, right? Like we like pass it off. But the thing is though, like the whole concept of it that's so powerful is that no, he was human. But we still have a remnant of that today. Another thing, too, has to do with transubstantiation.
And eventually,
which was the belief that when you consumed the wine and when you ate the bread, that it literally became his skin and his blood. And then you have and then what was the other one? I forget where it was. So there were just a couple of things that were, oh yeah, look at this. So to many in the empire, it seemed like a time of divine reckoning for humanity's sins. So, how many people in the church today think that the end is nigh? But we're talking about 3rd century, mid-3rd century, so like 250. Like that they're like, oh yeah, the end is nigh. And it's going to happen again and again and again throughout history, but yet here we are. So I think it's funny that like, I think one thing that we do as humans is that I think the easy way to explain it, now this is not a good example, but I think you'll get the point that I want to make. We tend to make mountains out of molehills. And what I mean by that is, it's like, look at the plagues that ravaged history. Do we honestly think that, like, the things that are happening in our current world are so much worse? Really? Like, when you think of the horrors that took place in antiquity. No, so God's going to pay more attention to our current day and age. When look at the bubonic plague, look at what was happening with the fall of Rome. There's so much terror and distress and things that have pervaded history. That's why in Revelation you have the things that were, are, and are to come. It's like this. I think that's where like religions like Hinduism and Buddhism have a really interesting point, where they view time as like a circle. It's like it's a cycle that keeps repeating in different facets and in different ways. I think in Buddhism it's the Dharma wheel, and it's like this constant thing that never stops turning. And so it's just in different ways, in different times, and different. Yeah, it's really interesting to me. But did anyone have anything to say before we go on to the next one?
I have a joke.
I
have a joke. It's a meme. It's
okay.
Jesus sitting with the children, and he's telling a child, I told them to take the skin off the peanuts.
They misheard me. They took it too far. Yes, I have the same one. I know. Yeah, that was funny. I said peanuts. Anyway.
Sorry, it just.
So the fun thing.
I thought it was interesting.
Yes, by all means, let me mute this so I can get that ready while you talk. Go ahead.
What they said about the percentage of Christians in the Roman Empire, and
I was thinking the same thing, but I didn't bring that up. Go ahead.
It was 10%. My argument is it was far less than 10% in the beginning, and up to 50%. That was because they took on so many of the Roman holidays and paganism, and urged people into the church. That's when a lot of the great
we're going to see that in this
melding came.
That's what the second part has to talk about, and I think it's interesting. So that's a great point. And when did things start going south for the returned exiles? So those who came back from exile, when did things start going south? Like really bad. Like really bad. What? What did Dad say?
Which one?
Which exile?
Oh no, before the Intertestament, right before the Intertestament.
That's when they got back.
Oh, and they were. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dad.
I was just saying as they got back to Jerusalem.
Yeah,
They intermixed.
And no, it wasn't the intermixing that did it.
No, it was
Nope.
showing up, and then they weren't building the temple, and they were dealing with local people, and had a lot of trials and tribulations. Right from the beginning of the return, it was a rough going, multiple times, multiple places.
But it was also right, and the other. I personally believe that it really started to spiral out of control when they started forcing their own people to behave in a certain way, in a way that was extra biblical. And I think
that was done because things were so bad, and they were trying to ship them into some kind of order and organize and get them unified. Yeah.
I wonder.
But at the same time, they started bringing in a lot of Greek tradition.
That was Intertestament, right?
Yeah.
So you're right.
Joe was talking, I think, about Ezra and Nehemiah time frame, not.
Oh, okay.
I was. No, this is great because this is a good review. What happened? You have. So they came back. The whole issue with like Ezra, especially Nehemiah, trying to tell people how to live, which was extra biblical, because he was trying to get them to toe the line even more, because they were already crossing over the line, which is a natural human reaction. And then from that, he started so he was trying to do things through works, right? And remember at the end of Nehemiah, he's like, remember the great things I did for you. And so that led into the Intertestament period. As such, like he couldn't stop that cycle from happening. That cycle had already begun. And that's when they started like accepting like Greek ways and things like that. But then you had the super zealots who wanted to preserve the things that were theirs. And so they fought against those they thought were infiltrating infiltrating Judaism. And it's like, I wonder if history repeats itself with Christianity.
Last time we talked about a few of the doctrinal disputes that tore the early church apart, even while they were being persecuted from the outside by the emperors in Rome. Disputes that to them seemed so important that they were often a bigger concern than getting thrown to the lions for their faith. Disputes that have been passed down to us for 2,000 years because they were so important to the early church that they made their way into the Bible. But the outside pressures on Christianity are about to end. Constantine is busy repealing the laws against Christians, and in 313, with the Edict of Milan, he restores essentially full rights to Christians within his empire. But this itself brings up another tricky problem. What do you do with those who had buckled under the pressure of the persecution? Those who had recanted or turned their back on the faith when threatened with imprisonment or death? What do you do with the fact that so many of those who had been asked to turn over the scriptures or to sacrifice to pagan gods were not merely converts to the religion, but even priests? Can you let them take an equal footing with those who had stood firm? Can you let those who had wavered in their faith administer the faith? And again, this question split the church. In North Africa, a bishop named Cecilian was elected the Bishop of Carthage, but he was a traditor, or one of those who had handed over Christian scriptures when threatened with persecution, and so his election was contested. In general, most of the Christian population was all right with accepting back into the fold those who had lapsed during a time of greatest trial, but especially in North Africa, there was a group that was far less forgiving. They viewed any sacraments given by such a bishop invalid, and so soon elected their own bishop, Donatus, and refused to acknowledge the authority of Cecilian, the bishop recognized by the church in Rome. As letters flew back and forth and sermons were given, Donatus decided to do an end run around those who were trying to unseat him and sent a letter to the emperor directly, asking him to weigh in. This was basically unheard of. The church settled church matters. The emperor settled matters of state. But here it was, and Constantine agreed to step in. Now this sets a precedent for hundreds of years of emperors, if not directly commending the church, at least having a great deal of sway over church matters. It effectively broke down the barrier between church and state. But at that time, no one knew that, and that's certainly not what broke down the barrier between church
this is important.
and state. But at that time, no one knew that, and that's certainly not what Donatus was thinking about. He was probably just trying to figure out how to get a fair shake when, right then, the only people who were allowed to judge his case were the very people he had essentially rebelled against, and the emperor was willing to grant him that. Constantine designated that a hearing be set with the Bishop of Rome and 3 other bishops from Gaul that he would pick personally to make sure that they had no stake in the matter. Then he went off to do other imperial things. But when the Donatist case came up, the Bishop of Rome had ninjaed in an additional 15 bishops that just so happened to agree with him. So, as you can probably guess, the trial didn't go so well for Donatus and his Donatists. In fact, it went so poorly that not only was their case thrown out, but their supporters were branded as heretical. So, of course, Donatus was pretty miffed and wrote the emperor again, saying, hey, look, there were about 12 more guys in that committee than you appointed. Can we, get another fairer hearing, maybe? So Constantine, interested in bringing the church back together, said, yeah, sure, and this time I'm just going to call a bunch of bishops from all over and have them hear you out so that way it can't be unfair. And so that's what he did. The Donatists again made their case, and again their case was rejected. This time, too, their views were branded as heretical, largely, as I understand it, because it called into question the sacrament of penance if there's something, even something as momentous as turning your back on the religion, that you can't atone for. So the Donatists went back to Africa and sent Constantine a 3rd letter, but by this point he had just about had it. He was actually hanging out at the trial this time, and he felt like they had gotten a fair shake. What do you guys want? Meanwhile, conflicts between the 2 viewpoints had begun to escalate to violence in North Africa, and that was it. Constantine basically said, don't make me come down there, and threatens to crush them all under his sandal. But then he got distracted by it.
I just gotta say, this is Christianity and violence and killing and all these things. Just like with all the whole, you got the Zealots and you got the Hellenized Jews and the forced circumcisions I wonder.
An itty-bitty civil war, and had no time for this ridiculousness. So the Donatists essentially became a major splinter church in North Africa that would be a thorn in the side of the empire for years to come. And in the countryside, it would survive right through Justinian's reconquest of North Africa centuries later. In fact, the Donatists would later harbor anti-Roman rebels, and some scholars have even argued that the disunity they caused weakened the province and essentially made it indefensible during the Arab conquests. So there's one crack in the unity of the empire and the church that doesn't ever go away. Now it's time to talk about the next, even bigger one, Arianism. Because just as the Donatist question was flaring up in Carthage, another schism was beginning to spin out of control in Alexandria, where a bishop named Arius was preaching a brand new understanding of the Trinity. Which means I'm going to now try and define the Trinity on the internet. Okay, so it's time for disclaimer 2. We are not theologians. What I'm offering here on any of this is meant as a serviceable understanding for people interested in exploring the history that's so intimately wrapped up in these things. But there is a lot more depth that could be gone into here, and the exact definition, well, that could be debated for 2,000 years, and it has. So that said, what is the idea of the Trinity? It's the concept that God is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost all rolled into one. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, in the loosest form, it's the idea that God the Father is in heaven, God the Spirit acts upon the world, and God the Son is the Christ who came down in human form to wash away humanity's sins. Now, that part seems simple enough, but there's one more part to it, the part that everybody fought about. In Trinitarian belief, God is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, but the Father is not the Son, nor the Holy Spirit. The Son is not the Father, nor the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit is neither the Father nor the Son. Confused yet? That's okay. It's one of the most difficult concepts in the entire Christian faith, and it's something that has caused more debate and infighting than almost anything else. But hopefully that brings everybody up to speed enough so that we can talk about this radical new idea that Arius was preaching. What was it? Well, he was preaching that because God the Father begat God the Son, while they were both still divine, God the Son was less than God the Father. They weren't co-equal and co-substantial in the way that the Trinitarian formation laid out. Now, this may not seem like a big deal to you, and fair enough. Truth is, the local bishop in Alexandria seemed to see it the same way. At first, he didn't do anything about this fractious doctrine. But soon it became clear that this wasn't just going away. The congregation was divided. Arguments were breaking out in meetings of the faithful. It was time to step in. The bishop in Alexandria called a synod, and they decided that this Arian doctrine was heresy. Arius was stripped of his priesthood, and he and his followers were excommunicated from the church. But it was too little too late. This idea had already spread throughout the Eastern Empire. This became a grueling feud that threatened to tear the church in two. Now, Constantine was trying, for a number of reasons, to basically hand these Christians the keys to being the #1 religion and the #1 empire in the known world, and here they were squabbling worse than pagan cults. Constantine was irked by this. So he sent down a cleric that he trusted to settle the matter and armed him with a letter that ends thusly. Open then for me henceforward, by your unity of judgment, that road to the regions of the east which your dissensions have closed against me. And permit me speedily to see yourselves and all other peoples rejoicing together, and render due acknowledgment to God in the language of praise and thanksgiving for the restoration of general concord and liberty to all. Basically, he was saying, guys, for serious, just stop fighting, let me get back to emperor stuff, please. But it just so happened that the cleric he sent down was a strident Trinitarian. So instead of finding a resolution and bringing everybody back together like Constantine had asked, the cleric decided that smashing the Arians in the face was a better idea. And he succeeded in basically causing a bunch of riots and not much else. So the cleric called a council to settle the matter once and for all. One where, at least theoretically, the Arians would be heard out. But the emperor, probably with an exasperated sigh, wrote to him, knowing full well that this council organized of the local clergy and the clearly biased cleric that he had just sent down was just another excuse to beat on the Arians, and suggested that they make it a truly universal council, inviting representatives from every district in the empire to come together and finally hammer out once and for all these squabbles that they've been having, so that he could get back to emperoring and spend some time founding a new capital in his own name. So join us next time as we dive into the Council of Nicaea, perhaps the most famous church council of all time. Will they solve the problems of the Christian church? Will they end the schisms once and for all? Find out next time. Or just take a wild guess. You'll probably be right.
No.
So anything before we go on to part 3 that stood out to you?
What is this, a Bible Project version of history or what?
I know, right? But it's not. I was searching for like concise ways of explaining Christian history, and I came across this. I'm like, this is good. Like this is like even though I don't think they're like they said they're not theologians, there's like it has a really good review on it's like bite size. It's like to understand the general.
A high level look at the whole thing. That makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like, and I think it's
into the nitty gritty.
Right, exactly. But I think it is interesting. But I have to say, it sounds very similar to what happened in the Intertestament period, where you had people who were staunch, like, almost like, what's the word? I would say zealots in their own right. Then you would have those, like, and then you had, like, the whole concept of church and state becoming one. Like, that's, like, don't tell me that there aren't debates on that very issue right now today. And then, it's just a very interesting way of looking at, like, wait a second. When you really look at these things, it's like they're having very similar issues that we come across in the modern age. But no, we're more important now. So, like, I think it's very good to see, like, how the same thing keeps repeating itself again and again.
It's easy to get a quote at libertymutual.com.
I don't care about Liberty Mutual. I just don't. Well, we'll see.
Liberty, 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 liberty. Experience the power of...
Oh, my goodness.
This
It is YouTube.
Of course it is.
Last we left off, Constantine had just called together a council of Christian bishops from around the known world. They were to resolve all the challenges of the church so that he, Constantine, could get back to uniting the empire under Christianity. The council was set to tackle issues ranging from what day to celebrate Easter to how to heal the Meletian Schism, a sect like the Donatists who were concerned with the readmittance of lapsed priests into the church. This council was also going to formalize how the liturgy was given, provide rules for the structure of the church, and set down some guidelines for being a priest. No living in the houses of young women, no self-castration, no engaging in usury, that sort of thing. But above all, they were there to deal with one thing, the Arian heresy. This was the main topic, the front and center issue that everybody had come to discuss. It was tearing apart the Christian world, and it was time it came to an end. So 318 bishops assembled in one late spring, 325 CE, in the coastal Anatolian town of Nicaea to settle this once and for all. The conference center was arrayed in splendor by the emperor. The bishops and all their aides and advisors were guests of the empire, housed, fed, and cared for at imperial expense. But more than that, the emperor himself would be in attendance. That's just how important this was to Constantine. Constantine set the tone for the meeting, walking in not surrounded by guards, as was the norm for the person of the emperor, but rather entering surrounded only by a few friends. This wasn't a battle, it was a time to come together. And so it began. The debate was vigorous, using all the rhetorical art the Roman world was famous for. Laity and clerics both engaged in arguing the merits of each side, while the emperor sat there, gently reminding everyone that they were all Christians here and that they needn't treat each other like enemies of the faith. And for weeks the discussions went on, contentious, impassioned, on at least one occasion breaking out into a brawl. But for all this, the truth was that most of the bishops were relatively moderate, looking to come to the correct answer, but believing that an answer could be found that both sides could agree to. And the emperor himself was happy to embrace anything that would just get all these guys to agree. So the discussions really resolved down to the points of view of two men. Arius, the namesake of Arianism, whose unbending views had caused the council to be summoned in the first place, and a man named Athanasius. Athanasius was a deacon of Alexandria, where the whole Arian schism began. He was an ardent anti-Arian, and he intended to do everything in his power to make sure that no compromise with the Arians was reached. And so time rolled forward with the council split, no overwhelming majority willing to come down on either side. Debate continued on how to achieve a compromise position, but the discussion wound in circles as these two men, Athanasius and Arius, dominated the discussion and kept any chance of truly finding a middle ground at bay. Still, time and again, the emperor reminded them all that they were here to heal the church, that as Romans and as Christians, they were more alike than different, and that they should be able to find a way to work such esoteric theological differences out. But Constantine, powerful, intelligent, and adroit as he was not the type of subtle theologian that Athanasius turned out to be. Because as the debate moved on, Athanasius began to introduce the term homoousian into the discussion. And this was a throw of the dice, because homoousian means of the same substance, which made many of the bishops a little uneasy, as it had been used in other heretical contexts before to claim that there was no difference between God the Son and God the Father. But Athanasius knew that this was a term that Arius had objected to in the past, and that he would never agree to any compromise that involved using the term homoousian. So Athanasius started to appear to be the reasonable one. He could look as if he were slightly willing to bend, knowing that no compromise he ever offered would be accepted so long as it could be worded talking about Christ as homoousian. And here's where the debate really began to get rowdy, because now people had to polarize. You had to agree with this term or not, as no one was going to compromise around it. There was one last attempt at bringing everyone together, though, trying to get people to meet in the middle and say that Christ was homoousian, or of similar nature to God. But by now, this was thoroughly rejected by all those who had declared themselves firmly on one side or another. And even as this compromise was being discussed, Athanasius was secretly pulling people over to his side. While the great debate was happening in public, the anti-Arian faction was making deals and persuading people in private. Slowly, bishop by bishop, they assembled a majority coalition. And soon that majority was threatening damnation and excommunication for anybody who followed the heretical Arian formulation. And so those less firm in their Arian beliefs began to switch sides as well. Not wanting to risk their immortal souls, or perhaps their positions in the church, almost every delegate signed on to the homoousian idea of Christ. Only Arius himself, one deacon, and 2 other bishops refused to sign what would become known as the Nicene Creed, cementing the Trinitarian view of Christ. And thus, Arianism was declared heresy, its teachings anathema, and its preaching an exilable offense. And so the emperor got up, dusted off his chlamys, and thought to himself, job well done. I mean, after all, he had brought all the priests together. They had basically all agreed on something, and he could now exile those few who had disagreed, unity would be restored, and he could get back to ruling the empire. But it's not quite that simple, because a few months later, Constantine found he also had to exile a man named Eusebius, a prelate who had signed the creed, but who continued to refuse to condemn Arius. This may seem like a small thing, one man being exiled over taking a half-hearted stand, not condemning his friend, but Eusebius was actually a distant relative of Constantine's, and unlike Arius, who was principally known in Egypt and the ecclesiastical circles of the East, Eusebius was a member of Constantine's court. In fact, that's why he had to exile him, because he kept pushing for Arius in Constantine's inner circle long after Constantine was good and done with this whole heresy thing. But Constantine's sister liked Eusebius, and soon he was recalled from exile. But if there was any doubt which side Eusebius was on, his exile cemented him as a firm Arian. And so he worked at court day by day to soften the emperor's views on Arianism. And, as even exiling its principal supporters and declaring the belief heretical hadn't actually stamped out the Arian beliefs, Constantine began to be receptive to the idea of a softer rapprochement than he had previously been, a kind of coexistence. After all, he wanted harmony in his empire. But harmony was not on Eusebius's mind. He schemed against Athanasius, never publicly putting himself in opposition to him, but getting other groups to accuse Athanasius of a myriad of crimes. At last, through a rigged trial, he was able to get Athanasius convicted, and he convinced the emperor that it was actually Athanasius who was now preventing the rift in the Christian church to heal, with his die-hard refusal to readmit schismatics into the church, and that he should be exiled. Meanwhile, Eusebius had also succeeded in getting Arius recalled. So with Athanasius exiled and Arius recalled, the Arian doctrine began to gain strength in the empire again. Constantine himself would, at the very end of his life, be baptized by Eusebius, and his son would be a die-hard Arian throughout his rule. And though after hundreds of years the Nicene Creed would eventually win out, this reprieve for Arianism allowed it to spread and slip out of the empire. For Eusebius ordained a Goth named Ulphilas to go on a mission to the Gothic tribes, and he was successful, converting many and cementing Arian Christianity as the Christianity of the northern tribes. And this is one of the reasons that the Gothic tribes never really integrated into the Roman Empire. It's one of the reasons that rather than become assimilated like so many other groups, they remained separate, integral to the empire, but never really being part of it. And in the end, it's part of why they tore the empire apart. Join us next time as we jump a few hundred years ahead for the Monophysite heresy, which plagued Justinian and destroyed the unity of Eastern Rome.
So, anything before part 4 and our break?
Very interesting how Christian they were.
I was thinking exactly the same thing. I mean, very, 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 very Christian, right? And I think what's great about it is it's just, so almost all of modern-day Christianity is based on the Nicene Creed. However, it's like, yeah, but it's interesting to see how the Nicene Creed came into existence through backstabbing and through backroom deals. And a very, very God, very Pauline in nature.
Yeah,
And,
it wasn't exactly the Jerusalem Council or anything. The one thing about
right?
Augustine is you have you have a copy of the Nicene Creed? I don't remember exactly what it says.
I think we can go over it right before break. I can look it up.
Yeah, I'm just thinking I think it's similar to the Apostles' Creed, but I'm not remembering right.
But no, I remember like when I would like do things over at an Episcopal church before, we would read the Nicene Creed every week. And it's but we'll get to that. Like anything else before we go on to the final bit here?
Yeah, but I don't think I better say it.
You can.
I can.
I mean, we are not opposed to controversy. I would be interested to hear what it is. Do you want me to turn off the recording?
Neither is your mother.
Okay. So for everyone online, we are actually just going to go offline just for one thing, just to have a bit of conversation. Sorry for all those. So I don't think there's any problem with what Mom just said. So that was the whole point I was getting at.
At this point in history, the church was not. This was no longer the Christian church. This is pseudo-Christianity because it had really nothing to do with what was taught. And what would fascinate me is to know exactly where the church, God's people, were.
I have a few things to say with that viewpoint, and I think I'll just pose them now, and we can have more discussion on this after the break.
At this point, it was the Roman Empire. It was the Roman Empire merged into the form. It was religion and mystical religion, basically, merged with the empire, because the hierarchy was exactly the same. It was built around the Roman Empire, right, but pulled in a lot of mystical, like Eastern practices.
Not just the Eastern.
Yeah, the liturgies, the repeating of basically incantations.
Right. We were talking about that recently.
All of that. Yeah.
I got something though, and this is gonna shake the branch a little, shake the trunk a little bit. So, what do we say about Judaism around the time of Christ's arrival? Was that really Judaism?
No.
But Christ came during that time.
Right.
But that wasn't Judaism.
Not original. Because he basically skinned them alive.
You got it. Yep, you got it. So he came and said, like, you know these things, but yet you don't do them.
Yeah, and they crucified him. Just like if he came now and said to people, "What are you doing? You're not the church."
I got one.
My church, and not only that, when an empire is built around a religion, at this point in time,
theocracy.
A theocracy. His kingdom is not of this world, and it doesn't work. And it's not. It's pseudo. It's a name that they use to control people.
Right. And that's the thing. It's just like I was posed the question not too long ago. It's like, do I think that a theocracy is possible? Like, and I think it is only when the kingdom is fully realized. Like that, when all things are made new. Like when all things are finally made new.
Only when God is the king.
Right. Because remember, we go back to Judges when it says, like, in those days Israel had no king. And it's, I think, like, I remember just recently looking at Judges, and it's like so funny, like every 7 verses, it's like in those days Israel had. And it's like it started slowly in Judges, and then you'll notice it keeps picking up the rhythm. Toward the end, it's only every few verses in those days Israel had no king. And it's like, and the whole purpose was that God himself became king. But then and it's like,
well, I venture this, that there have been theocracies in history, and none of them work.
One actually did a very good job, I personally believe. And I talked to someone about this recently. The Ottoman Empire did a pretty interesting job.
Well, where's the Ottoman Empire?
It's gone.
Yeah, it's gone.
It is. Oh no! Believe me, we're going to talk about the Ottoman Empire.
But a theocracy, though, when in this age, or any age of man, that, or should say the age of man's rule right now, that theocracies go south really quickly. As a matter of fact, I would venture to say from the inception, because they are the worst form of persecution.
That's true. Well, okay, so let me talk about the Ottoman Empire real quick, right? So the Ottoman Empire was founded on a specific variety. So you have like Sunni and Shia Islam, right? And so the Ottomans took one of them. I always get them confused, but I know they took one of the. I think it's Sunni. Might be wrong. I mix the terms up in my head, right? It's the one that Iran is part of today, I think. But anyway, so they had two court systems. One was that governed all Muslims, and the one that governed everyone else. And Christianity was allowed within their empire. They were viewed as kind of like second class, but like they were still able to conduct business. Yeah. And it was like everything was like things were cool. But talk about persecution among Muslims. And it's like it's like really interesting.
Yeah.
Like how
anytime it's like if you're not part of the big club,
right,
you're done.
Right. And it's like, so that's just with Islam, right? And then you have, look at all the, we're going to get to that because this is about Christianity. With Christianity as it's even come today, Christianity as it's seen today is nothing but a social club. A lot of it.
And if you're not part of that club and you don't do this and this and this and this, then you just don't fit in. You're not part of the club. And anybody outside of that club is, well, you better keep recording off of that one.
So, no, I don't have to.
No, what I'm saying is no, because there so many people condemn anybody that's outside of their little social club to hell. You know, they're going to burn, and you can't. I mean, that's nothing new. It's been going on as we're watching right here from.
I got it. I got one.
From the depths of the apostles, basically.
From Adam and Eve.
Yeah, I understand.
What I'm saying.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is with the church, and when the church was founded, when the apostles passed, the empire came in.
And I think there was a reason why in Revelation there's so much said about don't take the mark of the beast. I don't think they were talking about Gentiles. I don't think they were talking about, like, I think honestly it's the falsehood of the other branch of Christianity. It's like it's the genuine Antichrist. And it's because it's like, okay, I have so many memes in my phone right now that's basically saying that says something along the lines of, it's not that I hate Jesus, it's just that I don't like the people that say they represent him. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's the whole, this is what it is, and it's just, you could see it happen from the get-go. So I think that goes back to what Christ would say, like to the Pharisees. It's like, you say these things, but yet you shut the gates of heaven in people's faces. And this is, so anyway, anything else before we go into part 4? This is the last part before our break. So.
I said my piece.
Okay, here we go.
With us 125 years from the Council of Nicaea to the last days of the Western Roman Empire. Gaul, Hispania, much of North Africa have all been lost. Aryan barbarians control nearly all of the Western Roman world. Britannia had long ago been abandoned. The Huns have smashed into the empire, sapping its remaining strength. But there was still the East, with its rich provinces of Anatolia and Egypt to support the empire. If the East would just step in, perhaps Rome could be put back together as it had under the reign of Aurelian. But the East was in the middle of a religious dispute. Now, that wasn't the only reason this didn't happen, of course. At this point, the East and the West had in some ways become closer to rivals than to coordinated parts of the empire, and the Huns, although not causing as much damage as in the West, had extracted unimaginable tribute from the Eastern Empire. But for all that, it certainly didn't make it any more likely that the East would step in when, in the middle of this crisis, the Emperor, Theodosius II, found himself mired in a religious schism. And here's where it gets really complex. All that esoteric and minor doctrinal stuff we talked about in the previous episodes, that's just a warm-up for what's coming now, so get ready. So there's this monk, Nestorius, and he's chummy with the emperor. He gets tapped to be the Patriarch of Constantinople, just about the biggest deal you can be in the Christian world at the time, with Rome itself still barely part of the empire. But he gets caught up in a local debate over the nature of Christ and starts espousing that Christ has two separate natures, one divine and one human. We'll call this Nestorianism. This, of course, causes a huge flame-out with the folks that we'll call, for reasons that will become obvious in a moment, the Chalcedonians, as they believe that Christ had two perfectly unified natures, one divine and one human, which, of course, caused a huge blow-up with the guys that we'll call the Monophysites, who believed that Christ was entirely of one nature, divine and human. I know what you're thinking. If anything, this all makes too much sense. But just in case a few of you got lost in how much sense that just made, I'll dive into a little more detail. That really is the basic split, though. Does Christ have two separate natures, two unified natures, or one nature that sort of encompassed what everybody else calls two natures? And that may seem really trivial, but to people of the day, it was more than a simple matter of life and death. It was a matter of eternal life or eternal damnation. So this is really, really important to a lot of people. But it also gets wrapped up with church politics, regional disputes, and imperial authority. Because this guy, Cyril of Alexandria, starts calling Nestorius' teachings heretical. But the clergy in Constantinople are all basically like, hey, who are you from faraway Alexandria to be telling us what to do? So Cyril actually reaches out to the Pope in Rome and asks him for a judgment, who in turn basically says, Cyril, go excommunicate this guy if he doesn't change his mind in like 10 days. So Nestorius turns to his buddy, Theodosius II, and says, let's call a council and figure this out. And by figure this out, I mean let's excommunicate Cyril. But before the council even gets called, Cyril stands up and is basically like, you can...
How much does this feel like we're reading Chronicles or Kings? Like, how much does this feel like exactly the same thing? But anyway.
You can't excommunicate me. I excommunicate you. And now it's on. The council is called, and Cyril tries to ninja his way into being the guy running the council, basically by saying, I'm the guy running this council. At first, this doesn't work, but several of the delegations are delayed, and this gives Cyril time to prod some of the undecided bishops until he has a majority. And so he just declares the council started and himself in charge. Nestorius is, of course, having none of this, doesn't acknowledge Cyril, and refuses to accept that the council can begin before the delegation from Antioch arrives, which it hasn't yet. The bishops who back Nestorius all show up to the place where the council is being held to protest, and things start to get rowdy. At this point, the emperor's representative steps in and asks Cyril to just wait for 4 more days to see if the Antiochians arrive, which is when Cyril really steps up his ninja game and basically tricks the emperor's representative into reading the emperor's decree, which ends with an offhand line about how he wants them to, quote, start the council without delay and bring unity back to the church quickly. But an offhand line by the emperor is still an order by the emperor, and so with that imperial decree read aloud to what was effectively a quorum, because the protesting bishops who supported Nestorius were there in the hall, legally for both the church and the state, the council had now started. And of course that council promptly held up the excommunication of Nestorius. But then the delegation from Antioch finally arrives, and missed that Cyril had started the thing without them, forms their own council and excommunicates Cyril. So Cyril's council excommunicates the Antiochians, and now that everybody's excommunicated everybody else, everybody has to get word to the emperor, who's back in Constantinople, about who has been excommunicated. But the Nestorians have more friends at court, and they divert all of Cyril's messages, until Cyril's faction sends a man dressed as a beggar with a message hidden in a hollowed-out cane to secret his message through. So the emperor gets the news and banishes Nestorius, which clearly that resolves everything. Everyone would meekly give up, agree to get along, and all splits in the church would be healed forever. And yet, shockingly, everybody just kept excommunicating each other. The emperor called a second council to determine which of these excommunications were really legal. But this council was a mess too, famously known as the Robbers' Council, as it was convened with no time for any of the representatives from the West to get there, and so it was run almost entirely by Monophysites from the East. they proceed to excommunicate and condemn everybody even remotely connected with Nestorius. And then they went even further and basically declared that the only correct way to see Christ was as having one nature. And of course, this sets off everybody. The Pope was livid. The bishops that were excluded were furious. And it goes without saying that those who got excommunicated or condemned without having any say in the matter were a little put out as well. So the church starts to tear itself apart over this. And in the midst of all of it, Theodosius II croaks. So the new emperor, Marcian, calls a third council to try to unravel this and figure out if any of it was legal at all. So this time, the bishops all come together at a place called Chalcedon. All of the things the Second Council had said were basically immediately overturned. A bunch of the folks who had supported the Second Council were demoted or excommunicated, and the Chalcedonian Creed, or the idea that Christ was two perfectly combined natures, was adapted as official canon of the church. Okay, so surely now everything would be settled, right? Wrong again! See, this is right about where the Coptic, Ethiopian, Eritrean, Syriac, and Armenian Apostolic and Malankara churches split from what would now be called the Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches, although at the time they were really one thing. Remember in the Justinian and Theodora episodes how Justinian kept trying to bring the church back together? This is the split he would later be trying to heal. And remember how Justinian was Orthodox and Theodora was Monophysite? Again, that's a big deal because this council, the Council of Chalcedon, split the whole Christian world down those lines. And this division would rip the Byzantine world apart for centuries. It would take on political dimensions as well as religious ones, as one easy way to oppose the emperor was always to stir up whatever religious faction he wasn't a part of. This split would also make it easier for other groups to break the more Monophysite-leaning regions off from the empire as it started to decline. Who knows how history would have turned out without these schisms, heresies, and disputes? Would it have saved Rome, or would it have just left Europe even more fragmented without those hard-fought ideas to bind it together? What we do know is that all this thought and all this effort helped to shape the late classical and early medieval period. For better or worse, these esoteric disputes played a huge part in the transition from the ancient world to the medieval one. So thank you for bearing with us as we wound our way through all that esoterica. These names, Arianism, Monophysites, Chalcedonians, they're going to come up again and again as we discuss this period of history. And there's no way we could give a complete picture of this era without them. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Well, I think we did a pretty good job in 1 hour getting through about 500 years. That basically is where when you're talking about like the historical concept of where all the different churches branch off from. And so like the Coptics still exist out in Egypt. Like you would have, and it's like different, like the Syriac, like and it's really interesting to like think of like how very, very much like it's like we're reading just a re-rendition of the book of Judges, re-rendition of the book of Kings, Chronicles. I mean, that's kind of like the same. So it's yeah, these things really change. And anyway, anything before we have our break? Well, fine then. I guess we'll go ahead and have our break. So,
Break.
All right. We'll be back in it. Well, we were back from break, and Mom said something as soon as we went on break. So.
Oh. Where should I start with it?
You were just talking about like you were looking at the videos and the harlot thing.
Oh yeah, looking at the how the church, quote unquote, became like. Took over basically the known world at the time, and it just seems to me that one of the interpretations of the Babylon harlot is the world church. It's the Babylon of religious confusion, and the great church that took over the known world, and then all her offspring that are basically worldwide today. And that's just the Babylon of religious confusion. And I just think that that's one interpretation. There could be...
And Babylon is confusion.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Dualistic nature of prophecy and metaphor in prophecy. But that's just, it just seems to me that that's like a perfect fit. Because it's the harlot and the daughter, because the other one sprang out from her.
And if you remember right, when you had the woman, I think it's in chapter 12, with the dragon, and she gave birth and she was taken away on eagle's wings, it's like you had the antithesis of her was the harlot. And so you had, like you were saying, the dualistic nature. And in many different ways. But I did want to get into this. So this is the beauty of Wikipedia and how they have these wonderful charts. So not shown are non-Nicene. So this is all Nicene beliefs, non-Trinitarian restoration. So this is just the general concept. And what I love about that is it's just like, wow, and then how many do you have that are also non-Nicene and non-Trinitarian and restorationists? I think it's just really interesting to see all the confusion, like you said. And it's
Babylon. And this is just, they're
gonna blow my nose.
Well, yeah, because there you have Protestantism, a daughter spring off, and then all the other branches.
Sorry. But
it's Babylon.
It absolutely, and it's like, yeah, when you think of like Christ himself, it's like you would just even looking at the apostles. They talked about harmony and uniformity and like coming together, and not uniformity, unity, because it's not uniformity, it's unity. And it's like, and you don't see any really, what?
I was going to say, I think right there is the difference. They're trying to get uniformity, not unity.
Okay, you're very soft. Can you say that one more time?
I think that's the thing right there. Christianity is about unity, but not necessarily conformity. And that's what they were doing, is conformity, to get everybody conformed to the government and the way the Roman Empire was working, etc.
Got it. You got it. And I love it.
I was just going to say.
Again, that last sentence?
What?
Can you say that last sentence again?
I was going to say one more thing I was thinking during the break was if you get 2 or 3 Christians that are biblically literate and are sincere Christians, they're going to disagree on something. Mm-hmm. And it's not something where you need to sit there and get your fists out and beat each other over the head with. You could agree to disagree. A lot of the stuff that is people are disagreeing over is incidental things, especially if you're biblically oriented. If you're just traditionally oriented, then you got a totally different thing. But it's just interesting. And that's why I'm thinking is that these little video clips where these people are getting together, they don't seem like Christians at all. The way they're fighting and killing each other and trying to use the power of the state to convince somebody else, it's ridiculous.
But look at history, right down through Protestantism and all the back and forth between the Protestant divisions and the Catholic divisions, and there were no good guys, because whenever one would come in power, the first thing they did was persecute everybody else.
That's what I'm saying.
And it was Protestant as well as Orthodox.
You look at the problems that Peter and Paul had. They had disagreements, and along with Mark and that kind of thing, but they didn't have a knockdown drag out over it. They got kind of annoyed with one another and avoided each other for a while, but they came back together. That's the Christian way. It should be. It shouldn't be I'm going to have dominance over you and I'm going to run your life for you.
Well, I mean, in the middle of our break here, I was trying to assert my dominance over Mom. Just saying.
Well, I'm sure that didn't get that far. I'm sure that didn't go far.
But no, seriously though, like in our break, we had like issues where we were disagreeing with one another. But like, what I loved about it though was that we were disagreeing, but it was like us coming back together in it, because we both had that solid background of knowledge of Scripture, and we were looking at different points of the biblical text, like just through a conversation during break. And I think that's exactly what it is. It's like when I go to Sunday morning Bible study, like that's what we do. We come together, we talk about things that aren't necessarily, we don't necessarily believe the same things, but like the whole point is coming together so that way we could like encourage one another, and then Christ always, when we have that pure heart of trying to understand what it really is that is Christian, Christ always wins out. Like hands down, hands every time. And it's like that's as long as we are open-minded enough to allow him in. And what I see here is closed-mindedness. That like, no, you can't.
I'm sorry.
Wow. Wow.
I'm teasing.
But when you look at
the chart,
that's right. Yeah, no. But what I see before me. But you can see that's definitely closed-mindedness. And then think about Judaism as well. Like how many branch offs were there in the Intertestament? That was 400 years, and now here we are 2,000 years. And I got another one to show you. There's a reason why I showed you this one first. I'm trying to find the other one. There was is this it? Links between interdenominational movements and other developments within Protestantism. So then you have from 1500 on, you have all these ones within Protestantism.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
So it's like, yep.
Yeah. You have the Puritans that fled England, came here, founded their community, and started persecuting other people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you had Salem witch trials. It was ridiculous.
In all this mess, where are the true Christians?
We don't.
I think there are no. I think it would be a misnomer to say
they're hiding someplace. They're hiding from all.
I wasn't saying that. I was saying we don't necessarily know each other. God hasn't always brought his people together, but he told Elijah, I have people there that haven't bent the knee. You just don't know. I know who they are.
Well, you're looking at that chart there.
I mean, not me, but God knows. He told Elijah, I know who they are.
I know exactly who they are.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good.
Because I have that.
Or would you introduce us?
So let's tap into the void. So when you look at this chart, you see the first great awakening, second great awakening, third great awakening, and fourth great awakening, although the third and fourth are proposed. When you look at these things, though, it's like there were great things that happened. I do believe that remember, like, okay, so by the time 1750 rolled around, we were out of the Dark Ages. The Renaissance had already taken place, and we were in the Age of Enlightenment. And it was through the Age of Enlightenment that great things happened. A great amount of knowledge became available to people. The same thing again happened in the turn of the 1800s, or the 19th century. And then it happened yet again. Like what I'm saying is like, and then look at that fourth great awakening. This is when you have television that was available now. You had massive worldwide communication that took place. I do believe that God definitely made use of it. And I was just talking to my Hebrew classmates recently, like how awesome it is that we could just absorb like Hebrew when I would have to travel like great distances in order to have classes in Hebrew. And then again, I would probably have a problem with what variety of Hebrew I was learning. And it's like now it's like there's that great communication where right now we're having this Bible study pulling up charts like this that would have been not too easy to come across. And so it's like, yeah, I do believe that God was in there somewhere, like where, like Mom was saying, like with like Elijah's, like there's 7,000, and I do believe that a lot of the branch offs had good intentions. However, I heard someone say this. I forget exactly what the exact wording, but it's like whenever there is a division, whenever a division takes place, God is usually not in the mix. And what I mean by that is when someone, I'm trying to summarize it. It was a great conversation. I forget exactly how it came. But it's like, okay, let's say like with Martin Luther. I do believe that Martin Luther was led by God, right? And so when I do. later on things happened. He was like a Solomon of sorts.
Oh, we'll have to talk about that later.
We will think about it.
I definitely disagree.
Let's think about it. What translations were available in German at the time? What he had those what's it called, treatises, or like what are the?
I have a feeling maybe influenced by so that the translations would become available.
Absolutely, that's exactly what I mean.
But Martin Luther himself, I do not believe
had God-centered like type of mentality.
Right. I don't think he was led by God. I think he was influenced.
I don't think it's so easily judged. I don't think that situation is so easily judged.
I don't come across that easily.
I would tend to believe that when Luther started off, he was starting off with good intentions.
That's what I'm saying.
But
as he
went, things got a little bit down. It went downhill.
Yep. Hold on, I have to respond to someone real quick. Yes, that is.
I believe that for every invention that furthers man, God is behind it.
Sorry, I had to talk to
maybe something supernatural, but not necessarily God.
So what Dad was just saying, I'm sorry, I had to respond to something. I'm doing something tomorrow morning. I had to respond to that text. Okay, so what Dad was saying, so this is what I remembered as I was saying. So what Dad was saying, I do believe was right. The way I see Luther was that, yeah, absolutely, I do believe that he was like influenced by God. And then you would see through his writings, he changed. It was like a weird, and Dad would know what I'm talking about. It's like he went back on so many of his beliefs by the time he passed away. And I don't know exactly what caused those things to take place. And going back to what you were saying, Rashawn, and what Mom was saying, and now I'm remembering the rest of the conversation, is like I do believe God. Okay, this is the thing. This is going to the crux of what we're talking about. We see all these schisms. We see all these differences here. We see all these things that man created, right? That humankind created. But were it not for those divisions, were it not for these things that took place, I mean, I'm sure God could have worked miracles in other ways in order to get like information out to people, but it was through the human nature of the splits within the church that we came across the things that we have today. And I think that's why we have such a wealth of information today. I do believe, like you were saying, and both of you were saying, it's like God weaves things in amazing ways. Look at Judea when they came back from exile, and they started going wrong instantly. But Christ was born during the upheaval of those times. And it's really interesting to see how very similar things happen. So when things happen like these great awakenings, it's like even though most of it is human influence, it's just amazing to see like how God really does like still grow. And
I think he uses them for the furtherance of his people that are out there. But I still think we need to have a family discussion. Because I believe, no, not just Martin Luther, the Great Awakenings, quote, unquote, basically become their own form of fundamental.
You're right. I agree with you.
Fundamentalist Protestantism.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And it's like very far from Christianity. Judgmental.
Yeah.
And non-Christian.
I would agree.
But God, I believe, uses. I mean, he says he does. Mm-hmm. He guides. He allows. He furthers his plan. I mean, he will stop things when he needs to stop them and allow them when he wants to allow them. But and his people are out there all over the place, I believe.
Yeah.
Well, you know as well as I do, we know where there's a pocket of them.
Yeah.
And I mean, an obvious pocket of them. But overall, like these things that are touted as great awakenings, they're just another daughter.
Yeah, it is, and that's unfortunately the case I've seen. Okay, now if you were afraid of saying something, I'm not afraid of it. I think it's needed to be said. I do believe that the proposed fourth great awakening, going back to the same concept that we've been talking about, I do believe that great things happened during that fourth great awakening. Was it a great awakening? That's where I disagree with you. I do believe it was, at least as far as humanity is concerned, because a lot more knowledge was gained during that time. And it was through that knowledge that we are able to have discussions like we are today.
Men shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase.
Right, exactly. No, you're absolutely right. So what is it? It's an awakening.
It's an awakening, but it's not necessarily Christian.
You're right. Because I'm going back to
that's why what I'm saying. I think we're coming at this from cross purposes. What I'm saying is, yeah, there are awakenings, and things happen, and God uses and allows, and uses what happens. But as far as the awakening itself, generally far from Christian. It's like mostly just esoteric knowledge.
I was getting to that. So granted that we get these great things that we have today, for example, like all this knowledge that is abounding. I'm sorry, and this is a really opinionated statement, but I do believe it to be the case that the proposed fourth great awakening has ended up hurting more people than it has helped. And I believe that that's possibly very true in the first, second, and third. But I think the reason why I say that about the fourth is because you could still feel the immediate repercussions of it. It's still everywhere. There's a reason why people hate Christianity today, especially in America. There's a reason why people just don't go to church. And people from that fourth great awakening lament that people don't go to church, but it's because of the practices and the belief systems that formed during the fourth great awakening that has pushed people so far away that God has to work miracles to bring them back.
But see, that's the point. People don't go to church, but why the church isn't the church?
No, I get.
Yeah.
It's
not the church.
You're right, but what I'm using is the language that would identify better.
This is my church.
Right.
Right.
I get it. No,
Exactly.
I get it. No,
This
please understand. I think I'm talking on the whole. For how many times I've heard people beg for a revival.
Revival is happening in places just like this. Home.
Got it.
Not in a church.
It's funny because
this is a church.
Think about it.
What I mean is not in a building that was built for a specific purpose. No. I don't believe so. I believe that the revival happens in our hearts. And it happens in groups, small groups of people in private homes.
That's where the church was. The early church was in the home.
Exactly.
That'll preach.
Yeah.
In the home.
The thing is, when you say church today, you think of a building. It's not a building.
That's right, and that's what I was saying before. So oh my gosh, I look like a politician.
Yeah, I was thinking today. I was listening to someone today talking about all church today is playing church.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's why I was saying church before, because it's like go to a church. Like I'm talking about the
And watch the
conception of church, right? Like you know what I mean. Go to a church, and you will quickly hear laments about how people aren't in church anymore, about how people frequent other places more than church, about, like, you hear it all the time.
Because it's just another social club.
Exactly.
Right. And
I
not
don't want
to
to
mention,
be a member of a club.
It's a club.
but it's more than that. Because it's like, while that is the case, going back to a friend I just heard go on like this, kind of like a little bit of a ranting tirade recently. You know what I'm talking about. Like, she said something like, but the whole point is they think they're witnesses.
Yeah.
Like, the whole point is that, like, they think that they are providing a witness. And that's the saddest part. And then it's like, but anyway, like when I talk about church, it's like, how often do you go to a church building where you have people lament that the youth are no longer interested in and how many friends do I have that aren't Christian, but you have directly said to me, you know the types of people I'm talking about, where they come up to me and say, yeah, Christ is like, I almost swore because that's just the language. Like, Christ is the, but I can't stand Christians.
Yeah, exactly.
And how many times do I have people like just their jaws drop because I say I'm a Christian? They're like, you can't be. Because why? Why?
Because you're not like them.
Well, okay, so a mutual friend of ours started introducing me to other friends as a Christian, but not one of those.
But not like them.
Like we're something along those lines. It's like
he said he's a Christian, but not like them.
You know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yes. Not like them.
Yeah, but that's the whole point.
You always look like shocked that Joel's a Christian.
Did we go on a tangent?
No, I think this is the point.
Oh, okay.
No, this is the point I've been trying to get at. Because it's like, I think it's good to always remember, think about this as well. When we're looking at this from like the perspective of the Bible in the eyes of the scribes, right? And how often did even the Pharisees, they knew, in the scribes then, but we're talking about like, let's talk about the Pharisees, right? They knew like certain things. They knew the truth, but things were just, it's like they were so ingrained within the status quo. That's exactly what we have today.
They had the knowledge
That's what
that
Christ
they could
about.
pass on to the more.
Well, 1 second, that Rochelle was talking first. So go ahead. What?
That they had the knowledge that they could pass on to regular people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the congregation.
Mm-hmm.
But they chose not to because they didn't think they could handle the knowledge.
No, they did. They did pass on that knowledge. They actually did. They would, and basically it would be like, look at how good we do it. Like, look at how amazing we are. And it wasn't said that way. It was more like, no, we are just humble servants of the great God. But we make sure that we praise him in the most appropriate way. Does this sound like a modern day Christian like essence of what I'm saying right now? A lot of Christians say that today. It's like no, it's like we give our tithes, our offerings, we do these things, and it's like and we make sure that there is no swearing in this household, that we raise our children to be God-fearing. It's like on the outside it looks pristine, but when it's like when you look at it, that's what the Pharisees were. I have to hammer that home because everyone thinks that like the Pharisees were like these nefarious characters, and they kind of sort of were, but it's not the way that we often we demonize them. But it's like I think the most important point is to compare the Pharisees to modern day Christians, especially like those who are like higher level within a church, and to think about like how pristine households are, the happy faces that you will see among individuals. We are happy to serve God in such a way, and it's like, but God really isn't there. It's
it's scary because I grew up in a house like that.
You know what I'm talking about.
I grew up in a house like that. We were a Christian family. We went to church on Sunday night, and Wednesday prayer night. Not just the holidays. And when we get back home, I get smacked because I fidgeted too much in church. Just the hypocrisy that enveloped our household, it made me want to go to school. And yet I'd get to school and I'd be bullied constantly because of who my mother was. Because they knew her. They knew that she was a lie. Mm-hmm. She said she gave me freedom, but when I was asked to the prom, this is just one example. When I was asked to the prom, I was a junior. I was asked to the prom by a senior, the head football player, I might add, which in those days.
Oh, that's
a huge deal.
In those days.
Yeah.
And he said, if your mother will allow it.
It's funny. It's not funny, but it's funny.
I said, well, I'll ask. And he said, okay, well, I'll see you tomorrow at school. Because what I didn't understand that was going on in the background was every time I said something, my little sister backed it up. And then she added to it.
Oh.
How
hypocritical?
Yes. How hypocritical our mother was because she treated us so differently. I was the redheaded stepchild. I mean, I was the adopted one, which made me special. Mm. And yet the words when they come out of her mouth were more like the damned,
mm-hmm.
the unwanted. It just, and yet she would dress up and put makeup on and wear fancy hats to church. Because she was such a good Christian. She adopted a child out of a mental institution and took her off her medication at puberty, which was not a good idea. And I'm sorry I did that. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, you did what? No, you're fine. I was listening because I'm just sitting here. I forgot one thing. Dad still had something he wanted to say. Go ahead with what you're going to say because it has to do with what Rochelle just said.
Yeah, it kind of does. I remember we went to several churches when I was growing up. One of them.
I was thinking it was sounding very similar. I was just going to let you go.
One of them was an old school Lutheran.
Our mother was a Methodist.
Yeah, well, we went to the Methodist too, and that was the story. But anyhow, we went to an old school Lutheran, and it was hilarious because the elders of the congregation, the women, sat in the back of the church so that they could watch everybody coming in and notice what they were wearing.
Oh, yeah, right.
And how their kids behaved and how this and that. And that was the whole reason. They all sat in the back. Nothing to do with humility. They sat back there so they could watch everybody walk in.
I have a question. So when they ended up gossiping about people, was it done in the name of love?
No.
Actually, I don't think they cared.
Okay. Because I was just wondering, it's like, I wonder if it was ever done it's like, I saw Susan the other day with her child, and it's so terrible.
No, I've heard that in churches before, but not, but I say church reservedly.
This is the whole point. When we say church, we're talking about that.
We're talking about churchianity.
Yes, exactly.
The people that go to the building because it's the building.
The sanctuary.
Yeah.
And so Dad had something.
Yeah.
From way back.
I'm sorry, I do not remember what I was going to say.
Okay. I tried to get everyone involved. It was like, okay, so that's my fault. I did drop the ball on that, but I do remember you were trying to get somebody. I said, well, Rochelle was already talking when you jumped in. But okay, So with that said, I got one. It's like one thing is the concept of like in Christianity, everyone has to do and behave. And so one thing I've noticed that's like a split. We've talked about this when we were talking about like the gospel. Is like in church. Again, I'm not going to clarify it anymore. Like in churches, as in that concept, it's often like. It's said that, oh, everyone has their purpose, everyone has their role, everyone has their function, but yet you have to behave in exactly the same way.
Everybody
like, make it make sense.
In their tiny little box.
Right. It's like, make it make sense for me. and if you, in any way, shape, or form, have something that, in that perception veers way off, well, then we're going to have a sit-down conversation about that. And have people be corrected for that.
That's right.
So I think it's anyway. There was another. Okay, wait. There's another chart. I'm wondering if it's on one page or the other. I did want to show you guys. Trying to look for it. I think it's on the other one. I know it's on this one. What? There. No, there's a map. Was it here? Oh, there it is. This is pretty interesting, though. Now, we were talking about the concept of the harlot and the daughters. But the thing is, though, if you're talking about the world's perception of Christianity, so we're talking about those who identify as Christian, with more than 50% of the population identifying as Christian. Look at that. That is truly a worldwide thing, right? It's amazing. And then you have like from 10 to 50% are the pink areas. And then you have the state religion here is Islam, right?
You know what's interesting about that?
What?
Look at the non-blue. And the other one.
Oh, yeah.
What? What's the green?
Yeah, you have the Chinese and you have the Middle East and you have Western
Africa. Wait a minute. What was the known world basically at the time?
This.
The whole part like around Israel and into Africa, that was like basically
the Mediterranean.
And then the Roman Empire, and Europe still is blue or purple at this point, but Europe is that. But the rest of the known world is mostly Muslim. I mean, what was the known world at the time when Jesus was?
Roman Empire was really big.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
So most of where the Roman Empire was is still Christian, except for Northern Africa. If you remember the video said it was because of the problems in North Africa that they were a thorn in the side of the rest of Rome. Go ahead.
Augustine, remember Augustine, Saint Augustine?
Yes.
He was African.
Actually, a lot of people were.
He was out of Northern Africa. So.
Another map. Sorry.
The Muslims took over, though. It's primarily Muslim, but that was quote Christian end quote at the time.
And what's really funny is that the barbarians a lot of them were, they called themselves Christian, but yet the rest of the Roman Empire considered them heretical. But anyway.
What I think is interesting, though, is like what the part of the world that I'm not talking about from like Iran or Babylon and Syria. I'm not talking about that over to China, India, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about the Muslim world.
The Old Testament world.
Yeah, this.
It's not Christian.
Yeah. It's
not considered Christian, quote unquote. It's Muslim.
Right. And we're going to talk about the Muslims in just 1 second here. This is what I love, right? So I'm gonna say something that's very serious, and I think it's something to ponder. We're going to talk about world terms of things, right? We're not talking about the true church versus that. We're talking about people who identify as Christian. Remember. Okay, so look at that. That's basically the whole world. When you look at that, like the whole world around, right? So you got this area, which is, you have the state religion, which is Islam here. In all the green areas. You got Malaysia's down here, you got like
north of that.
Yeah, I forget, is it Brunei or something? Anyway.
Yeah. Hindu and Buddhist
It's all
over in
Bangladesh.
India. I know.
And what's that?
I said that's the old Bangladesh. I think it's called something else now.
Myanmar.
Yeah, that's it. It used to be Bangladesh.
Myanmar. Yeah, so that's Bangladesh. Yeah, I thought this was Bangladesh right here. It doesn't matter. But like it could very well be. Like you probably are right. And so you got like all this stuff. Now, how many, I'm going to ask a really pointed, and I mean purposefully pointed. How many, so you see like the extent of the Muslim world and the extent of the Christian world. But yet, why is it said that, that the Muslims are trying to take over all of the Christian nations? It's funny to me that there is such this draw and this ire when it's like when you're talking about the nations of.
If you want to answer to that, I think it has to do with the migrations of the Muslims and the refugees and they're coming over and inundating populations that are non-Muslim, and they're looking at it as almost like an invasion.
Oh, yeah, right?
I don't necessarily
I wonder how people felt about these Christian refugees.
Yeah. Well, I just heard a really interesting podcast about that kind of thing, about the people fleeing the Muslim territories into Europe, Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
There was this group distributing free Bibles in their languages and stuff. And they were talking about the number of Muslims that were migrated into Europe and are converting to Christianity, not the other way around. It's not being publicized, and a lot of those people are in danger because if they go too public about it, they could wind up dead, especially if they go back to their home countries and stuff. But it's an opportunity when people are coming in. Instead of looking at them as the enemy, look at them as potential friends and acquaintances and possibly Christians.
Yeah, look at that picture, though. Those are refugees from the Great Ottoman Empire. So, again, the theocracy...
This is when the Ottoman fell.
Okay.
Ottoman Empire fell in that year. So go ahead. Yep.
Okay, but still, it's just the theocracy persecuting other religions.
But this is okay. I get that. This is definitely the result of the war, though. And yes, and not to mention, no, you're absolutely right. I wanted to bring this up though, and
but the thing, Joel, about it, it's almost every mass migration is due to a war. Sometimes famine and problems and stuff. But if you look at the migrations that are going on recently,
you're right.
It's war.
And almost every mass migration is caused by politics.
I wonder how many people looked at.
Isn't that part of the war process?
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder how many people in 1922, when they saw these Christians moving in caravans from one place to the next, I wonder how many of them were afraid of the Christians coming in and destroying their way of life. And
what I wonder about that, Joel, is what the Christians would look at that and say, look at all these Muslims are coming at us. Watch out, they're caravanning at us.
Right. Or how about people caravanning in from South America?
Or like Jen said, like your friend from...
no, don't mention where it was from.
Okay, your friend said that about Christians seeing Christians, quote unquote, Christians seeing Christians coming and saying, oh, we can't help that. We can't do that.
No, we can't possibly.
Yeah.
And it's like, but the thing is, though, it's funny because when Christ talks about, you were there, you opened your home to me. And he goes, blessed are you because you gave me food and all that stuff. Like you know what I'm talking about. But he said, and you have the other version, when they're like, when did we ever not feed you? It's like when you didn't do this for the least of these. But yet we get so wound up in stuff like that. I think it really calls into question. It's like, what are we really, going back to Jonah, let's really consider if we're truly on God's side. I think when it goes back to what Dad was saying about, like, regardless of if Muslims convert to Christianity, or let's just say that Muslims go throughout Europe and then eventually in the next couple hundred years, they become predominantly Muslim. So, does that really matter? Think about it. Like, when you really look at the whole grand scheme of history, it's happened. It ebbs and then it flows, and then it goes up and then it goes down. And it's like, do we honestly think that God's going to work? Look back at what Rochelle was just saying about, like, how this is what church is, right? We come together in places like this. We always have. When you look at the history of like what Christianity is, I'm sure there were home churches throughout it all. And here we are in just another iteration of a home church. Mm-hmm. And this is just and so will the tide of history go. Honestly, think about it. When Christianity began, they were not the majority. And so, like, to think that, like, let's just say that
they're still not.
You're correct. It's like, but you know what I'm getting at, though. What?
But if you look at it, almost every single church in the New Testament were churches and houses.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially because they had their little courtyard, their atrium.
Well, yeah, but the idea was they didn't own their own buildings. They were going in people's homes that had the capacity for them, and most of them probably were just small 10 or 20 people in a house, that kind of thing. It wasn't like the big cathedrals that people build.
That's the way AA started.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on.
Well, that's like China. In China, the Christians there meet in homes, and they're illegal, but they meet in homes because, believe me, the organized churches over there are government run, and they're not Christian, but the Christians meet in homes.
What's this one, Joel?
Yeah, you mean here? Or you're talking? Oh no, I was just browsing through. I was looking for something, but it doesn't matter. Home churches were basically the way it's always been. Think about Christ went in and he ate at the homes of tax collectors and stuff like that, right? But I think. I'm trying to think of how to put it. I got one. Like when people come in from off the street and then sit in the middle of the congregation and we're obviously just trying to look for some sort of message, right? And then they leave and no one goes after them. But yet that is supposedly a house of God, right? And or like when another thing too is like the concept of Islam and how terrified people are that they might institute Sharia law, right? The great and terrible terror of the horrible Sharia law. But how many people on that same wagon say that the United States should become a theocracy of Christianity and dictate to people how to live, who they can marry? It's very Christian. To dictate to others how to live, right? Instead of bending down, and helping people, telling you, and it's like, but no, we got to be terrified of Sharia law coming in. It's like, it's the same type of thing. It's just slightly different nuance. But yet the people that would support a theocracy of the United States, or any country, right? Like the Christian theocracy, would think that what they're doing is a service. Don't Muslims who want to institute Sharia law think they're also doing God a service? What were you saying?
Yeah, I have a thought to posit, I guess. We don't, in this country, so far, although we do ostracize people for what they believe. But But what I'm saying is, Sharia law will stone you. Okay, you will be stoned for certain things, or hung, or thrown from the top of a building. So far in this,
Lynching? Lynching.
Well, hold on. Yeah, but so far those are not legal. They're not instituted by the government, other than, well, we'll go there another time. People, infiltrators. But the point is,
lynching.
So far, legally speaking.
Witch burning.
Legally speaking. Hold on.
That was legal witch
You're
burning.
not letting me finish where I'm going. The thing is,
I'm right, you're wrong.
I'm saying legally. Listen, legally, it's not legal to persecute people legally so far for what they believe, or in many cases do. However, this is where I'm going. You're not letting me. However, if we were a theocracy, if this country actually became a theocracy, I do not believe that it would be long before there would be legal persecution.
There already is.
But not like stoning a woman because, I don't think it would be long with a theocracy, because looking back through history, it always goes that way.
I'm going to be very, very pointed in what I say, okay? Just clarification. What I'm saying is pointed. First of all, let's just start with this one. The Salem witch trials were legal. They formed the basis for modern-day U.S. law 200 years before the U.S., about 150 years before the U.S. became a country. And the whole concept of, about 100 years ago, when there was a whole bunch of movements with the KKK, a lot of what they did, like the concept of citizens' arrest and things like that, were legal. And they had a legal twist to them. Now, let's talk about it this way, right? Just offhand, just like think in your head, how many people along the political spectrum, doesn't matter what side, how many people along the political spectrum say, you know what, those other people deserve to die? The people who believe differently than I do deserve to be hung. They're traitors. They don't believe in God. They don't worship the one true God. They're right. It wouldn't be long. My guess would be a generation.
I might be wrong, but I believe that if a woman is found guilty of adultery, she can be thrown in jail.
You mean you think that should be the case?
No, I think that is the case.
Where?
Here.
I don't think so.
But they manipulate the law so that if a woman is caught committing adultery, she can go to jail. Because they twist it so that they say she's going to jail for something else.
Oh, I see what you're saying. It took me a second to figure out what you were saying.
For adultery.
It took me a second to figure out what you were saying. Yeah, like the corruption you're talking about.
Yes.
The backdoor deals. Yes.
Yeah.
It took me a second. I agree, because I've been looking at some... What?
But not a man. A man can go to jail for not paying his child support. And they say it's for something else.
I can't say what I want to say, but I want to say it so bad.
But I don't think it would be long. I don't think it would be. Oh, and not only that, but it would be a matter of minutes, I believe, before there was infighting in whose religion should be. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's its own politics.
Exactly.
That's its own form of politics.
Yep.
It's always the case.
Yeah.
Always.
Which flavor should we go with today? You know, it's like
peanut butter brownie.
Yeah, it's all. Religion is its own politics, and organized religion basically is its own form of politics, and it would be minutes before there were street fights over which religion was the top dog.
What are you saying?
Or
like, what are you saying? Like, are you saying that it would be like the Roman just before Constantine there?
Well, of course, we learned from that, right?
No, we're sophisticated.
We've learned.
We're sophisticated.
That's why they do that now.
No, we've had our awakening.
Yeah.
We're sophisticated.
This is like,
Say it already.
So, I had to
forgive me for the cynicism, but it's just from watching the world and a lot of life and history, it's, I need to pray out the cynicism, but it wouldn't be long.
Be gone with cynicism.
Yeah, be gone.
We declare it.
Be gone from me. but that's true though. People believe that, we've had our awakenings, we're sophisticated, we understand, we wouldn't we wouldn't crucify Christ if he walked into a church either.
Yes, they would.
When you've done this.
In a hot minute.
In a hot minute.
He claims to be God.
Yeah.
I had a conversation not too long ago. Now, this is because of my own experience, right? Like, this is just like what I've encountered and like some of the opinions I've seen while growing up and all that stuff. And it's like I had a conversation with someone not too long ago, and it's like, how many times do I have gay people come up and talk to me because they want to understand what I believe because of the fact that I'm Christian and I'm gay. I actually came across something that was amazing. I'm going to read it. It was a meme, and it's awesome. I thought it was cool, so I got to read it. It's actually a marquee in front of a church, right?
That's a good one.
And it was
amazing. So true.
And I think it really nailed it on its head. Okay, this is a real marquee. A gay Christian is not an oxymoron. A hateful Christian most certainly is. And I thought that was really well put. And the reason why I'm saying that was I had a conversation with someone not too long ago, and it's just like, how crazy it is. It's like how often the Christian church ostracizes gay people. And it's like, well, they're all going to hell. And it's just like, talk about the love that is sorely lacking when conversations are held in such a manner. And it's like, imagine bringing a gay friend of mine into a congregation. It's like, I would rather put myself under a guillotine than do something like that because of how much pain and hurt that would cause. I'm more willing to put myself, and that's what Christianity is to put yourself between. It's like the intercessory type of thing, and it's like that's yeah, and it's like, but yet, because of the fact that I would not be comfortable bringing a gay friend to church, because of that, they're still ostracized. That is the worst. That is just the worst.
Because they don't take the time to get to know them as a human being.
That's right. Oh, I got another one. How about people that believe in different religions? I know one right now that I'm just recently met. Is, you know who I'm talking about, is a follower of Odin. It's an old Norse belief. They also are called heathens. Like the name of their religion is heathenry, or followers of Odin. And like this person I know is currently in a position similar to like a mission, like similar to a rescue mission, but it's not a rescue mission. But it's not really Christian, but like a lot of people who are there are Christian. And they force her to sit because they know she's not Christian. They force her to sit in rooms where she's preached at and guilt tripped in order to, like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, yeah, that's totally what Jesus would do.
Oh, yeah.
Totally. And it goes back to what that person said. They think they're witnesses, and it's the worst. And it's, anyway.
That explains what's happening, actually. That's the whole crux of the problem, is that they are Christians. So they're trying to convert her because she believes wrong.
You know, what people don't understand is it's not we who convert people. It's God working in them. That's the great miracle of Christianity. And I'm talking about Christianity with a capital C. Christianity, because it's God that calls, God does the conversion.
Yes, exactly.
And the church, that God's people, the church nourishes that.
It doesn't happen with the stripes on your back. It happens in your heart. That's why they
it's through the heart.
Convert me to their religion, because they were literally putting stripes on my back and taking me to church and saying, "See how good Christians we are."
Right.
Oh, I got one.
It's the purpose. Who says the church, the mother of us all? It's
right.
Like when God calls and converts people, then the church, Christians, nourish the little ones.
They're supposed.
I got.
No, I'm talking about the church. I'm talking about God's people.
I got one. Look at all the. They're not convents, but they're like the reform schools. Or look at all the places in like Australia and here in the United States with like the Native Americans and all the things they did with the Aborigines of Australia and like all that stuff in the name of God. You have the Crusades that were in the name of God. You got like it's ridiculous.
Oh.
They make them
modern day. We know a church in Orlando that's out of the Chinese missionary tradition. Mm-hmm. And they are Christian, period. They are a Christian. They're God's people. There's no doubt when you're with them, they are God's people. And the reason that they are, I believe God called them, each one of them individually, and put them here in this church. And when they came together, they knew that something was wrong. And Eric talked to them, and we've talked to them and asked, well, what did you do? How did you come to this understanding? And when you go there, it's the closest thing that you can imagine in this day and age, the closest thing that you can imagine to what the brand new church was like.
Mhm.
The spirit there, the way they take care of each other, the way they work with the community. You know, they're witnesses in the community. They don't go out and browbeat people, but they witness to their community. They have an answer for the hope that lies in them.
It's really amazing.
And they're phenomenal. They're Christian.
Crazy.
They are Christian. And their answer basically was they got on their knees with their Bibles together and in small groups. And another thing, to go to prayer with them is I mean, God's there. He's with you. It's amazing. But they got on their knees and they prayed with their Bibles and with each other and in small groups, and they had an awakening, and because God blessed that attitude and their prayer, and He showed them basically, and what they did, they told us they basically threw out the missionary tradition because it was not true.
It's a big point.
They threw it out. And they talked about how the missionaries were condescending and evil. And maybe they thought they were doing right, but they were not helpful. And they are not really highly thought of.
And I have to be very clear here. When I was living in Beijing, the reason that China is really anti-Christian right now, and from what I've seen from the conversations that I've had, I've come across missionaries there. And all it is just the forcing of Western culture upon them. All it is. And it's like, yeah, God's in there, I guess. And I had some good conversations. And I'm saying, no, there's something, okay. Back in the 1800s, in 1850-ish, there was a thing called the Taiping Rebellion. This is just to fill in the background real quick. And I know we have to end here within 10 minutes. I just have to give some background on why, the historical implications of things, right? The Taiping Rebellion was, you got this guy who said that he was the new emperor of China, and he took on Christianity, and he became sort of like a bishop in his own right, and there's a whole thing that happened with that, right? Then you also had the British missionaries that were coming over, and the Taiping Rebellion was quashed. It was destroyed, and then it wasn't too long after that you had the opium scandal, which is where you had the British coming over and basically getting a whole ton of Chinese people addicted to a horrendous narcotic, and it was done on purpose too. It's historically relevant to that, right? And a lot of people who did it, a lot of them were missionaries. And so because of the sour taste in the mouth that came from the Christian promotion of Western doctrine and stuff like that, they were pushed out. You had the first Opium War, which took place at the turn of the century, and then you had the second Opium War. And then right after, so this was all happening with when they were having, China was in turmoil because of what the West had done to them. It was really crazy. So, as a culture, as a whole, the reason why they are so anti that type of mentality and any sort of proselytization, the reason why they're so heavily against it is because of that history. And it's and I've heard people say that all Chinese people are going to hell, and I'm just not their own fault. And I don't think that God would do something like that.
And I wouldn't say all, but much of the persecution of missionaries in China, at least as far as I know, are self-inflicted, as in many places. It's self-inflicted, and And the people that we talked to, the people that we talked to in the church in Orlando, they basically said as they studied and learned and God helped them, they realized how wrongly they'd been taught. And
so sad.
And it is sad. And they were treated like little children and basically just talked down to and preached to and they were afflicted.
Don't get me wrong. Some amazing things happened with mission trips over there. For example, I can think of like when Nanjing was taken over, and the Japanese had encroached upon the city, and you had some similar to like rescue mission type places. They had lodges like there. It was like the capital at the time, and so when the Japanese were coming in, because of the fact that there were Westerners there. They stood between the Japanese and the Chinese that were hidden inside of the buildings that they were in. And they saved a lot of people. And so I'm not downplaying the amazing wonders that did happen.
No, they're bravery in many cases.
Right.
But as far as theology is concerned, it's like way off base.
And the reason, and I think the easiest way to explain it would be, imagine if you had a Chinese person come over here and really promote Confucianism and Taoism and Buddhism or Zen and really promote it as the one and only way and everyone else here is wrong. I wonder how well they would be received, especially if they got into some backroom deals with higher-ups in the government. Until finally you had someone say, "I am the true Zen master," and then create like this uprising where you have like this schism, and then finally when that's stamped out, it's like we don't want anything to do with this type of ideology anymore. I wonder, I wonder if there's any correlation to that. So, and to stop with that and to end it, it would be like, I wonder if there's any correlation to modern-day Christianity in America, why so many of the younger generation have had enough.
Yeah, because they've been missionized by the local community
for hundreds of years now.
Yeah,
it's like it all
white man's burden mentality.
Oh my goodness.
Well, that's the whole thing with missionaryism. It's white man's burden, and it's so condescending, and it's racist.
The worst part to me is when I met missionaries over there, they didn't speak Chinese.
Yeah, that's terrible.
They didn't speak it.
It's because they don't need to.
That's the whole point.
They're better.
And it's like,
no, they were ready to speak in tongues probably, and it happened.
But I'm not saying this is the other thing though. Look at Canada. They just dug up that mass grave over there. And what did they do? Like they forced those children to speak English from their own land. Like they forced them to
the Native Americans.
That's what the Canadians did. Like that's what the Canadian they're called Reformation houses or something like that. And it was just like they forced them to speak English. No, they never actually. Maybe there was a couple of people who actually learned like their languages, but no. I mean, we are saving them, right? So it's them that we are
I can't. If you, especially as a missionary, if you're going to another country to save the people, you would think you would have the decency and the respect for them to learn their language.
I'm really okay. I'm going to end with this. Paul was a missionary. He knew Greek. He knew the culture of the people that he was talking to. He said he wasn't learned in rhetoric. And it's like, compare it to what we receive. It's like, but yet, I don't know. I'm saying this out of distress because it's like, I would rejoice so fervently if the situation were to turn around like this. Like, just like God is known to do, is to turn things on their head. And
He will.
I was just getting there. You just hit it.
He will.
It's like, I would just rejoice so much. But as it stands, I feel as if we're in groaning pains of labor, screams of distress. I feel as if when we really think about it, we are screaming to God saying, how long, O Lord? How long? Mm-hmm. And that's when we receive the message. A little while longer. Keep going. Mm-hmm.
Keep the faith.
Keep it. Because it's because of stark opposition, not being part of the bandwagon.
That's the whole point.
That's the point.
Like true Christianity
not being in the
not
bandwagon.
be a part of the world.
It's exactly it. But yet how hard it is to move. Yeah, it's like, and that's what I pray for all of us. Like all of us. Like we're in that process, but we got to kill ourselves dead. Like when it comes to that, like we really do, and like myself included. And it's like I have my own preconceived notions that I've been trying to really destroy, because I feel as I told people that I feel as if I'm walking to a wedding and I'm trying to get everything ready for that. And it's like I'm trying, and it's not through works necessarily, but like I'm fervent right now. Anyway. I think that's it. We're definitely we've ended this late before, but still, it's like we gotta let some people go. So without further ado, let's go ahead and give it to God. Father, I really don't know what to say. Help us. You've helped us so much already. Help us all. May we truly be on an equal playing field with one another. May we truly search for, I'm correcting that. May we not be on an equal playing field. May those who follow, as we follow you, may we throw ourselves down under those who need our help and push them up to our own detriment, just like you did. And as a result, they may be able to turn around and pull us back up so that way we can all live in the kingdom together where joy is everlasting, where there will be no more sorrow or tears or pain. May we continue to seek each other's well-being and benefit and strength. When correction is needed, genuine correction is needed, may we approach it with the most loving manner. May we open our arms up and say, I've been there too. And not in a condescending way. May we be able to change us. It's you who changes us. Left to our own devices, we can just see all these schisms, all these disagreements, all these things where you're wrong, I'm right, and God's on our side rather than us being on your side. May we not be Jonah. May we not be like everything we see in history. May we truly be representatives of who you are, and may we be you here because you live in us. This year is almost over. This Hebrew year is almost over, and we're approaching the Passover. May we remember your sacrifice at all times and be forever overjoyed that you didn't leave us in the dust. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for saving us. And thank you for making your wedding vows to us. May we take them and not look back. In the name of Jesus Christ, we humbly pray.
Amen.
Amen.